Morning and welcome to a Back Alley Bonsai. Today is a lovely cloudy day in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, California. And I'm going to work on something a little different today. Rather than working on one of my regular bonsais, I'm going to be working on these carnivorous plants. So I've got a couple of carnivorous plants. I'll show them to you guys here. I'll give you some close-ups in a moment. I've got in here a couple of these Sundews. I believe these are Cape Sundews from South Africa. So we got that one, and you can see this one is flowered, nice long stem on that one. And then we've got this one right here as well. And then I've got this Venus Flytrap, which is from the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, very, very swampy kinds of things. And carnivorous plants are kind of weird. They are very sensitive. They want a very specific growing medium, very specific type of soil that they have to grow in. And they also have really specific requirements for the kinds of water. The natural environments for a lot of these carnivorous plants is I describe as basically garbage. They grow in swamps, which, like I said, South Carolina swamplands. They're typically high humidity environments, and as a result, the water doesn't have a lot in it. It tends to be very acidic without a lot of organic content in it, and it tends to be very, very mushy. So as a result, they cannot be watered with ordinary tap water. They will die. You cannot use any fertilizers on them. They will die. The roots are very sensitive to any kind of environmental changes, and that's why they're carnivorous plants. The soil is bad. They can't get their nutrients that way, and so they absorb nutrients either through these specialized leaves on the Venus flytraps, which snap shut and eat insects, or they will be like these sundews, which are like a glue trap, and they will actually stick little insects to them. And I will try and zoom in here so you can see a little bit, hopefully. Maybe we can get this to focus. Not particularly well. It really wants to focus on my face. But the little dark marks you can see on there, those are actually gnats and ants and things like that that have gotten stuck in the sundews. And as a result, that's basically where it gets its nutrition from. So these have been in these pots for a while. I keep them in this terrarium. There's usually some amount of standing water in it. You can see this terrarium has gotten a little grody. So it needs some cleaning as well. So basically they usually sit in some amount of standing water, usually rainwater or distilled water. And as far as soils go, and repotting them and keeping them from getting too root bound, you basically want to use something pretty inert. It's essentially sphagnum moss and some sand, coarse sand, and that's about it. You don't do anything else to them. Any fertilizers or organics, they will typically kick the bucket. So they can be real tricky. They also like lots and lots of sun, which makes them very weird plants. High humidity, lots of sun, trashy soil with nothing in it. It's got to be kept basically marshy and boggy at all times. There's lots of tricks that people use to keep these things alive, bottom watering and stuff like that. Whatever keeps them marshy is basically what you want. These sundews are actually really tall. This is very... I don't know if this is a bad sign on a sundew. Unfortunately, I'm not enough of an expert on them. I don't think anybody really is. But, as they grow taller and taller, and they drop off these leaves. I have never seen a picture of a sundew in the wild that was very tall. They tend to stay pretty low to the ground, and I think that this is an artifact of basically growing in pots. There's not much I can do about it other than to repot them and kind of lower them back down into the soil. And they seem to do okay when I do that. So they seem to really, really thrive. So all these plants are really healthy. I'm pretty happy about them. I'm actually really excited about this Venus flytrap because what you can probably see in there is little bitty leaves. And the little bitty ones here, this is a pup that's a separate plant. I'm going to try and separate that one out and see if I can get it into a pot and have another Venus flytrap. I may actually have two pups in here looking at it. So I'm pretty excited. Maybe it's just the one. Either way, I'm excited. Free Venus flytrap. So What I'm going to be doing first, I'm going to get these guys out of their current soil, take a look at their roots. I'll get you guys some nice close-ups of that, and then I will clean out the terrarium. Not much to show with that, so I'm probably not going to show you that particular aspect of it. And we'll get these guys repotted, and we'll get them back into their terrarium. So I'll be back in just a moment. All right, so I'm back, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare some soil for these guys. I have this sort of pre-mixed soil. This is a combination of coconut hair absorbent and some sand and some pumice. It's pretty good for them. It's pretty neutral. It doesn't have a lot of organic material in it. So the problem is it's very dry, so I need to soak it, first things first, in some distilled water. And a lot of these things start off being kind of hydrophobic, so they need a little bit of time to saturate and stir in order to get them to actually absorb the water into them. So we'll just get that sort of mixed up a bit. And I may need to put in some more absorbent, but it's a little misleading. It can take a little while to really activate. You see it's starting to clump up, but it's a little hydrophobic at this stage. So we will come back to this, I think, in probably a few minutes and see how it's doing. It's already starting to thicken up a bit, which tells me that it's starting to actually absorb. And if it doesn't fully absorb, I can always add in some more absorbent material. Once that is right, there we go. That's getting nice and gloppy. So hopefully you guys can see that okay. Still a little sandy. Probably needs some more absorbent in there. Okay, so let's add a little bit more. Just sort of keep working that around. And at this stage, it doesn't have to be too swampy, because we're going to obviously water these plants after we get them resettled and repotted. All right, so I'm just going to take all of that. I'm going to set it aside. And next, we are going to take a look at the roots on these two Sundews and see how exactly they are looking. So we are just going to go ahead and crack them out of their pots here. And hopefully we can get them out okay. Oh, this one's a little bound. Let's see if we can get them loose. Doesn't want to come out. I don't want to damage it. Again, these guys have really weak roots. I feel it breaking. But yeah, this guy's definitely pot bound. You can see this nice ring of roots down at the bottom. It's not too bad. A lot of this soil is pretty gummed up. So I'll take that one and set it aside. And this one here. See if we can get this one out. That one's coming out okay. Much deeper into the pot, but we can see it's real swampy and black and kind of oily in there. But that's pretty normal for these things. But we can see all these roots growing out to the sides. Definitely time for a repot on both of these plants. So I'm going to get some scissors and we will get started on repotting these guys. So I'll be right back. All right, so I am back. I've got my scissors. And I'm just going to begin by taking this one here. And I am going to start off by just clipping away at some of these longer roots at the bottom. Just toss them aside. And kind of breaking up some of this soil just to see what kind of roots it actually does have. As you can see, it's a really healthy plant, so I'm not too worried about doing damage to it. It's probably going to survive whatever I do to it. But the roots on these, I want to show you, just, even though this plant is very healthy, very verdant, super green, just how fine the roots really are on these plants. And I'm just kind of picking away at a lot of the soil. There's some sphagnum moss and some surface moss in there. But that is basically it. Like I'm just gently knocking this away. I'm not pulling or tugging or anything like that. That's it. Like that's the entire root base on this thing. It's not much. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up kind of the bottom, some of these drooping leaves a bit, some of these older stems. These drooping leaves are starting to reach the end of their effective lifespan for the tree, and then you can for the plant, and you can see mixed in here all these old leaves that have just dropped down to the bottom. So I'm going to clip a lot of those away as well, just to kind of clean it up a bit and see what I'm working with. So hopefully you can see that okay. And then we'll go in and clip out these ones. I'm trying to avoid accidentally clipping away at the stem because it's actually got a very narrow little stem on it. But like I said, I want to kind of get this cleaned up a bit because I'm planning on burying it a little deeper than it was. And I'm going to cover some of this stem back up. So I want to kind of get these leaves out of the way and make that a little easier. Alright, cool. And yeah, there we go. That looks pretty good. So let's knock out its pot. I'm going to use the same pot again. There's no reason not to. The pot's perfectly fine. It's about the right size and scope for this plant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my soil mix that I've made over here, and I'm going to take and just glop a little bit into the bottom, just to kind of set up a base in the pot, tamp it down pretty good. And then again, get this thing to a point where it looks about right in the pot, and I want to set this a little lower than it was before, as I mentioned. And yeah, I definitely need to get some more soil mixed up here. That's okay. In fact, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some dried soil, and I'm going to toss that into the bottom of the pot because it'll absorb a bunch of water here in a minute. And then from there, I will start just kind of glopping soil around it. This is not a super fine task for this part of things. This is just literally taking soil and tossing it in the pot and just sort of stabilizing it. Always misleading just how much soil you really need for these guys. And again, a little bit of dry soil is okay at this stage. We're going to water it, it's going to expand, it's going to sort of stabilize in the pot. All right, so that is one sundew potted up. Some old junky material off of there. And then we'll do the same thing for this one. We'll kind of pick away at its soil a little bit here and see what we got. And again, we're going to see kind of the same thing, just a lot of very fine, thin roots that just sort of go to the bottom. So there we go. Like that's basically the root ball of this particular plant. They just drop to the bottom of the pot where all the water is. And we'll clip some of that away. Good. And we'll break up some of this top layer with all the moss that's holding it together. And again, same basic thing. We'll cut away our flower stem. It's done its job. They're very, very pretty, delicate little purpley flowers. A lot of people like to cut away the flowers before they bloom, but I like watching them unfold. I've never really had it be a problem. Some people worry about the energy that it takes to produce flowers because these are such sensitive plants. But again, I've never really had a huge problem with it. Get rid of some of these low-hanging leaves. There's an old stem. All right. All right. There we go. And again, you can see kind of the same thing. There's our roots to it. It's just these long hanging down roots. Not a lot to it. And again, same basic thing. We'll just take a glop of potting mix here, throw it in the bottom. And then we will settle it in, and then let's do it this way. This from here, and we'll just start sort of settling it into the soil. And we need a bit more. All right, and there we go. There's another sundew repotted. So we can get them a little bit more vertical. Sorry, I'm trying to refrain from gendering my plants unnecessarily. All right, let's get some of this gloppity old soil out of the way. And now we will move on to this fly trap. And like I said, there's a pup in here I'm going to try and separate out from the parent plant and move it into its own pot. And let's see how easy this one wants to come out. The answer is not at all. There we go. And this one here has been growing in essentially just straight sphagnum moss. You can tell by this coloration on it. This is a product of Australia. It's actually a really good growing medium. It's very dense. I use it fairly often, and since it's what this plant is used to, I probably should just go back to that. But yeah, sphagnum moss doesn't have anything in it. There's like no soil, or there's no sand, there's nothing. So I'm just going to open this up and we'll take a look at it. And this plant is a rhizome plant, and we can see the rhizome right there. That's the actual like base of the plant. As you can see, it's actually really deep in the soil. That actually keeps the plant safe when it snows, because it does snow in the Carolinas, and the temperatures get down very far. All right, there's our pup. Pull that out. So that's our flytrap pup right there. That's the little one. And I'm going to try and disturb this one as little as possible. I'm basically just going to leave it in its own material since it's not badly overgrown. This actually is looking really good. This soil is not overgrown at all. I'm probably just going to reuse a lot of it and just give each of these fly traps a little bit more space. Yeah, I don't see any real reason to change any of this. Yeah, so I'm just going to get some sphagnum moss. I'm going to use that instead of the other growing medium. So I'll be right back with some sphagnum moss. All right, so this is sphagnum moss. It comes from New Zealand, I think. But it's a really good growing medium. It absorbs a ton of moisture. It's good for cuttings. It's good for any kind of plant where you just need moisture retention, but also want little gaps in the spacing for air to flow through. Same thing, just soaking it in some distilled water and not much else. Trying not to contaminate or overly acidify my growing medium. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bigger fly trap, the parent fly trap, and parent trap. All right. And again, I'm going to reuse a lot of this soil because it's actually pretty good. It doesn't need a ton. But I'm going to go ahead and place it back into the medium. And bury it nice and deep, because again, these fly traps do like being really far in the soil to protect that rhizome. And I'm not going to do anything too fancy with it. Like I mentioned, I'm going to try and keep it basically as it was, since it seemed really happy with what was going on. And the trick with fly traps is just keeping them alive. Like, if you can keep a fly trap alive for a couple of years, you've done a bang-up job. They are tricky. Because, like I said, they like humidity, they like free-draining soils, and they like nothing else. A lot of sun. But any amount of fertilizer or anything like that can be really dangerous. Rainwater is great. Distilled water is great. It's supposed to rain here in a couple of days, so I'm pretty hopeful about that. Let nature take care of my plants for me. Always the preference. All right, cool. There's one repotted Venus flytrap. And here's the pup. And again, don't want to mess with it too much. It's actually doing really good. So I'm just going to start off setting some soil in the bottom. Big old roots in the sphagnum moss. And then we'll take the pup and I may need to clear some stuff off the bottom. Its roots are real short, so we can probably get it all the way to there. Yeah, there we go. And then just pack in some soil around it. The thing about this sphagnum moss is that, and really any of the potting soils I've used today, is that as they absorb moisture, they will expand, which will tighten up the fit in the pot for the plant. All right, cool. And there is a little baby Venus flytrap in a pot. All right, so let's get this stuff out of the way, and I will come back with my terrarium. All right, welcome back. So now we're just going to take some of my distilled water here, and we're just going to toss it into the bottom of the terrarium, just enough to kind of reach the bottom of the pots. And then we'll take our plants and put them back in, and try and get them kind of situated so they don't crowd each other too bad. I may need a bigger terrarium soon, but that's for another day. That's okay. And then I'm just going to give everybody a little bit of water from the top. And the natural capillary action will pull water up from the bottom. So that's all good. Like I said, that's one of the advantages of the swampy terrarium. But yeah, there we go. So there's my repotted Venus flytraps and sundews.